there is a buildup of foreign military installations here. HMS Dragon, as you said, is on its way, along with helicopters. The French government have sent the Languedoc frigate, and the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier is also on its way. That will be accompanied by all of its other infrastructure that follows the Charles de Gaulle. As we know, Greece has sent other things as well. So the general region is going to be a much more interesting place to be over the next few days and weeks, I'm sure.
Meanwhile, in the UK, the Prime Minister has said Britain will deploy HMS Dragon and helicopters with anti-drone capabilities in Cyprus. HMS Dragon is a Type 45 destroyer, the only type of equipment the Royal Navy has to shoot down ballistic missiles. We can speak to Tom Cleaver, chief reporter of the Cyprus Mail, who is in Nicosia. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much for joining us. Well, we were hearing from a listener there about the concern about our inability as a country to protect this base. Is that fair?
Well, the base has been permanently there since Cyprus was given its independence in 1960, and the question of whether it could be defended was never really brought up after 1986, the last time it was hit. And I think, to be honest with you, most people, both inside the base and in Cyprus at large, were sort of taken by surprise at the fact that a drone hit the runway on Monday morning. Obviously, the response since then has been from other countries as well. One of your listeners said that Greece has deployed 2 frigates, and there are 4 fighter jets now at Paphos Airport. And of course, Britain, being a lot further away, has had to deploy a ship from Portsmouth, which is obviously going to take longer to get there. So I don't know if it's unfair to say that the UK has reacted slowly, but others have got there first.
And what's the feeling there at the moment? I mean, is there a sense, you say that people were surprised that the base was hit. Is there a sense of unease? Is there a sense that Britain and others need to do more to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Well, many Cypriots have long felt that far from offering protection, the British bases really put a target on the back of Cyprus, and therefore of the Cypriots, especially people who live near the bases. A couple of villages were evacuated on Monday for that reason. And for that reason, I think a lot of people in Cyprus feel that they would rather not have the base there at all, rather than it be defended even more, because a lot of people believe here that were there no base there would have been no reason for Iran to, or whoever fired the missile, it could have been fired from the Lebanon by Hezbollah, some believe, there'd have been no reason for anyone to fire that missile that drone in the direction of Cyprus.
And I mean, you mentioned Lebanon and Israel, a very short boat crossing away. Is there now a concern that Cyprus could be drawn into this more deeply?
Well, the government is saying that it absolutely wants no part in this. They've made clear that the only role they want in any ongoing conflict is humanitarian. I believe the local Cypriot National Guard does not have the capabilities to fight such a war, nor would it have any interest in doing so. However, there is a buildup of foreign military installations here. HMS Dragon, as you said, is on its way, along with helicopters. The French government have sent the Languedoc frigate, and the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier is also on its way. That will be accompanied by all of its other infrastructure that follows the Charles de Gaulle. As we know, Greece has sent other things as well. So the general region is going to be a much more interesting place to be over the next few days and weeks, I'm sure.
And Tom, can you give our listeners an idea of what goes on at the base? Because, some people might ask, what kind of assets are held there? What kind of work goes on there? How many people are interacting there? What kind of a base is it?
Well, it's a permanent military base, and it's also British sovereign territory. So next to the base, there are British people who live there. They become, I don't know exactly the length of time they stay, but they come and they rotate. Akrotiri, the main RAF base, has at the moment, I believe, F-35 fighter jets. I also believe they were deployed last night. From information available to me, they were deployed over Jordan last night. It also has a Voyager air-to-air refueling aircraft as well. At Degelia, it's smaller what's available to them. There is the Kingsfield aerodrome in Degelia, but I don't believe it's being used by fighter jets at all. Degelia as well is also sovereign British territory. So about 3% of Cyprus, it belongs permanently to the British. They were never incorporated into the Republic of Cyprus when it declared independence in 1960. So these have large numbers of British people stationed here, as well as that the villages within those sovereign-based areas in which Cypriots live are considered to be British territory. If you commit a crime there, the British police will arrest you. And those villages, as I said, the village of Akrotiri, other villages around were evacuated temporarily. The evacuation in Akrotiri itself is in place until Friday. It was the same around Paphos Airport, which is in Cypriot territory. A few villages were evacuated there because it was believed that one of the drones fired on Monday could have been in the direction of Paphos Airport because there's an airbase there belonging to the Cypriot military.
Yeah.
But in the end, that was shot down.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for that overview. Really great to get your thoughts this morning.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too. That is Tom Cleaver there, the chief reporter of the Cyprus Mail.
And a good reminder that the base is sovereign British territory, so there was a strike on sovereign British territory.
Exactly. Iran is still suffering an internet blackout, so reports are scarce about what's happening inside the country. But some Iranians have decided to leave and have been telling their stories.
Yeah, correspondent Emily Wither is in the city of Van near the Turkish-Iranian border and has been speaking to Iranians who's decided to leave by that route. And we can speak to her now. Morning to you, Emily.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you so much for talking to us. So you're talking to Iranians as they leave the country and get across to Turkey. What sort of things have they been saying to you?
Yeah, so Turkey has 3 land borders and a very long border with Iran. And Iranians can come here without a visa. They can enter on a 90-day tourist visa, and some are choosing to do so. We're not talking huge numbers at the moment, but definitely a steady stream that I've seen over the last few days of people coming out who are describing bomb blasts, seeing explosions and fires and feeling quite terrified. I've spoken to a few families who just didn't really have a plan. They sat in very heavy traffic getting out of the capital, Tehran, just to get their children to safety. One woman said that now that she was in Turkey, she hadn't figured out the rest. She just wanted to get her 3-year-old daughter out of the country. Another man I spoke to, he was actually dropping off his family, and then he was planning to go back because he wanted to stand by his country and, wanted to return. And I think what's interesting is feelings are quite mixed. No one really has a straight answer here. You know, I've spoken to a number of people who have thanked Trump for what they've done. There are others who they want to see the fall of the regime, but they don't really think that this is the right way to go about it. Some people are quite hopeful. One woman said that, she had hope for the future, but that she had no idea what it looked like. And I think that's what really struck me talking to people, is that no one could predict what was going to happen next. When you asked them, what does this look like in a few weeks' time? No one really had an answer. And so I think that's really a reflection of just how many unknowns there are at the moment.
And presumably the people who are coming out are going to be less inclined towards the regime, almost by definition, the sort of people you'll be speaking to.
Not necessarily,
Really?
Because Turkey has very strong ties with Iran. There's a huge diaspora here. There's enormous trade that happens between the two countries. And so Iranians do pass back and forth across Turkey. So not everybody is necessarily anti-regime. It's a lot more nuanced than that, because you can not like the government, but then you also don't necessarily want to see chaos in the country or want to see the country being attacked. I also thought what was interesting is that people who are obviously anti-regime, they still have so much fear about talking to the media.
Yeah.
So many people I spoke to, they didn't want to give me their name. Many asked me for a couple of people asked me for my ID to prove I was a journalist. And so even though the regime has been hit quite hard over the last few days, it shows that people are still really quite afraid to be critical, even though they're in another country. And another thing that's been happening, I've noticed, is one woman who came immediately across the border wanted to hotspot from our phones because she had no idea what the rest of her journey looked like, because she hadn't really been able to get on the internet.
Yeah.
Others had asked me, what's the nearest airport? How many flights a day are there? Because they just haven't really had access to the internet. So some people are coming here, not because they're anti-regime, but because they just want to get online. I spoke to some teachers who said they weren't really into politics, but they were online teachers and they were going to lose their jobs if they didn't have the internet. So it's a real mixed bag at the moment.
You forget, don't you, just how having the internet is basically now such an integral part of human existence, like water or food. It's almost one of the necessities, and if it's not there, how much lives will be upturned. Just finally, you're saying there's not that many people crossing the border. Presumably there's some concern among for the Turkish government that you could have loads and loads of refugees coming across at some point who then might also want to go through into Europe?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, because right now the people coming from Iran, they're not refugees. They're entering on a tourist visa. They have 90 days, and nearly everyone I've spoken to, no one said that they don't want to return unless they have a second passport and are going on to another country. And Iran is a country of over 90 million people. So if airstrikes start to hit more of the country, if they start to hit more civilian targets, so not military installations or regime buildings, we might start to see a mass influx of refugees. And the numbers would be enormous. And that's something that Turkey is very fearful of. The Turks went through that with the Syrian conflict, where over 4 million Syrians came to Turkey, and it's obviously Syria is a much smaller country, and it caused huge tension in Turkey. There was, disagreements over jobs, resources. The economy here is doing really badly. There's a bad cost of living crisis, and all of that causes, more tensions in countries when you have huge numbers of refugees arriving. And Turkey is desperate to avoid that, and so they have been very measured throughout all of this. They've said that what's happening in Iran is a violation of international law, and that talks are the way forward. And they really do have that concern about this huge number of refugees coming.
Yeah, and we'll see if that happens. We'll see how the conflict continues. Really interesting stuff, Emily. Very grateful for you for talking to us. Thank you so much.